This morning we are very privileged to be hearing from Garry Hart about staff retention. So Garry is responsible for providing tailored search solutions for engineering and surveying, partnering with consultancies in this space. He has a strong background in engineering, having previously worked in construction and served in the Royal Engineers before moving into engineering recruitment, where he has worked for the last 10 years. Throughout his career, he has specialised in field engineering and later in design engineering. He now focuses his discipline on his love for construction and design and has built a reputable engineering and surveying desk. He is passionate about finding the right match for clients and candidates and ensuring that he makes a long-lasting impact with every placement. Outside of work, he's recently taken up AFL, fantastic, and has adopted a team Carlton, not so fantastic, from a Collingwood supporter, along with his son and daughter. He enjoys spending time with them as much as possible, being outdoors and supporting his ELP team Arsenal. Garry, over to you.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you for the introduction. So, I moved to Australia back in 2019. We just decided I was sponsored to come out here actually to work for another recruitment business, and literally just sold the house, moved over to Australia. I'd never been here before. I remember kind of the first thoughts I had was because the bushfires had just started back end of 2019, which I'd never witnessed anything like that before. And that went on for a few months, and then we seemed to have like mass flooding down that east coast into the early part of 2020, and then I think COVID started, and I just remember thinking, wow, what a crazy few months. And Australia seemed like a place of extremes with the flooding and the bushfires. But we've absolutely loved it here so far. As mentioned, I've got two young children, Owen and Lily. Recently adopted Carlton as our footy team. Although we've only managed to see them win two games now. We've won 2 games since we've been watching them. But yeah, the kids are really into it. So that's going well. Previous to recruitment, as you mentioned there, I was actually in the British Army as a Royal Engineer, so I do have an engineering background. Not necessarily in surveying, but I've worked around surveyors, various different trades, and done a lot of building and construction work in the Army. I've been working in recruitment for coming up to 11 years now. With the last nearly 5 of those years here in Australia. It's always been around that engineering and design and construction sectors. So yeah, well equipped to do that kind of recruitment, I'd say. A lot of what I'm going to speak to you about today will likely be well known to all of you. However, there may be a few insights that you just weren't aware of, that hopefully you can take away from this. Before we go into this though, retention might not feel like the biggest concern at the moment because of the state of affairs in Victoria at the moment. A lot of businesses making redundancies and not having as many projects, certainly not as many projects as they had a few years back. A little bit like COVID in some ways, where we had that period where a lot of people were kind of stuck in the same jobs. They weren't able to move. But then towards the end and once it had passed, we had the kind of the Great Resignation, let's call it, and everyone was kind of off looking for new jobs. And I think we will get to a similar stage once the market starts to pick up. You will be in a situation where you need to be aware of how your staff are feeling, what their next plans are with their career, to make sure that you can avoid losing those people that you really do want to retain. So retention strategy isn't necessarily about bolting the door shut so people can't leave. It's more about stopping them having that impulse to leave in the first place. There's a few different topics we'll be covering off today: retention, culture, effective leadership, salaries, benefits, keep or lose, and then we'll do a conclusion and some Q&A for people who have any questions. So how long staff stay with an employer? According to various studies, the national average employee tenure is around 3.3 years. For workers over 45, the average is about 6.8 years. And if you're under 25, it's likely to be closer to just over a year and a half. So on gauging that information, you can have a think to where your business is in comparison. Perhaps at the end, if you're a business that is exceeding this, you can share with us, your approach and what's working for you. But on the flip, if you're a business that's definitely below this, maybe happy to answer any questions and takeaways that you might have from this session. The cost of a new hire, according to SEEK, the average cost of a new hire is roughly 1.4 times the person's salary. This includes recruitment costs, onboarding, training, slowdown in projects whilst you're getting someone up to speed, and all those other things. I actually think it might be a little bit more than that. Especially if you're bringing in maybe someone a little bit less experienced, maybe you've lost a more senior person. I think that could definitely be higher than that with project slowdown. So if you take that as it says here, 100k salary would roughly mean 40k worth of costs on top of that total package that's offered to that person as additional costs to you as a business. You might be thinking, why do we care about you guys retaining staff? That's often something that we hear. But as a recruiter, it's definitely better for us that we work with businesses that are able to scale effectively, bring in bigger and more projects. Often if people stay in a business, generally means that there's a better workplace culture, people stay longer, therefore it's a more attractive proposition to people looking in on your business, wanting to come and work for those. So it essentially becomes an easier sell for us as well when trying to tempt people to the business. So it's definitely in our interest to work with businesses that are able to retain staff, effectively. So some of the tools that we use, and the reason, I just want to do a little bit about the kind of tools we use, is so that you can understand how quickly things can escalate. So LinkedIn is a big one for us. Obviously we use Seek, adverts, our own CRMs, referrals, network, all those things. But with recruitment, if you've not understood a member of staff as to where they are in their career, how happy they are in the business, and how they're feeling, it only takes literally them to flick their status to open to work, and we get notified immediately. And I think on average, someone will receive around about 16 messages in the first 24 hours of having that turned on. And often that's all it takes for someone, 16 messages, a couple of calls, and that's it. Everything's been set in motion at that point, and things can be turned around pretty quickly. So that's why you really do need to be, all over this as best as possible, understanding your your staff. So, culture. Well, we all know that for most people, culture is about playing lots of ping pong, after work beers, having lots of fun, isn't it? I say that tongue in cheek. Of course, we know that's certainly not the case, although it definitely does have its pros. But for most people, culture is about empowering staff, making them feel safe, that they have a voice within the business, and engaged with you as an employer. Are your business values aligned in some way, shape, or form with this, or does your business even have a set of values that you work towards? And if not, it's definitely something you need to think about. Otherwise, how can you have a fighting chance of finding the right people? When you're hiring them. Our values are maturity, consistency, and respect, and that's pretty typical of what we look for in someone's character when we're speaking to them. So, if I was going to say to remember, if there was a few things to remember, when it comes to culture within your business, it would be to shape the story of what your company vision is. Where are you going to be going, and what do you want to achieve? And share this with your staff. Make sure that they're aware of it, they're bought in, and they want to align themselves with your vision moving forward. Ask your people, don't tell them. So often, look, this can't always be the case, but let them be heard. Have they got a voice? Can they give their opinion into the business at times? Can they put business ideas forward? And will that be listened to? Often that makes them feel very valued, bought into the business long term. If you can, create leaders, allow people who want the opportunity to grow to support and lead. Empower them to become leaders, and allow them to, it allows you to focus more on what you need to be doing at that more top end of the business. And embrace failure. It's okay to struggle and need support. We just need to understand why, and work on ways to train and make any of those issues better. It shouldn't be an awful negative experience. And it's okay to make mistakes, as long as they can obviously be rectified and worked on. And hold each other accountable. And by doing so, what you start to do is create a culture whereby everyone's bought in, aligned with the business, and can hopefully flourish long term. We find that an issue in surveying can often be burnout in people, and this can obviously lead to dissatisfaction, and people becoming toxic at times in the workplace. People don't necessarily burn out because they're working on challenging projects or jobs, but it's often because they can't see an end to the work that they're doing. Maybe that hasn't been communicated by the senior management. Maybe they're not aware if they'll be going on to other jobs. So it's really about keeping them up to date, addressing any problems or concerns that people might have, and making them aware that they understand it's a long-term project at the moment, but if they are starting to burn out, there is light at the end of the tunnel. After this, they can be put onto another project, maybe closer to home, so they can get a bit more time with family or whatever it might be. That's something we hear quite a lot in surveying. Okay, so leadership and management. So I've just put in here an example of an email that was sent by the owner of a staffing business. So some of you may have read this before. It's been in the news. It was in the national papers a few years back. I won't read it word for word, but essentially, I think the owner has just got so fed up of some of his staff's behaviours. He's basically resorted to writing a quite direct email threatening to essentially sack a lot of his people if they don't pick their game up. Now, I've put that in there as an example of probably what not to do, and there's certain things that you can do before you need to get to this. Well, hopefully you don't ever need to get to this stage, but there's definitely a management learning piece from that. Only 43% of employees surveyed in a local study have more than a one-day onboarding process, and often it's a lot less than that. So it's very important that when you're onboarding someone, that it's an opportunity to showcase your leadership, your processes, how organized the business is, and make a good impression first time round. Employee turnover is highest in the first 45 days. So it's a crucial period where you can still lose someone, because don't forget, when someone's just joined you, they have just often gone through a recruitment process with probably multiple other businesses. There's still other recruiters speaking to them at this point. So if they enter into a business and realize that actually it's not what was promised, it seems to be very disorganized, there's a strong chance they might reach out, or a recruiter that has been speaking to them reaches out and can potentially tempt them to move into another job. So yeah, definitely something to be aware of. Now, just coming back to this email, so there's a lot of talk at the moment around contemporary leadership. This definitely isn't a case of that, but I think what is really important is that you're not afraid to ask people how they're feeling, understanding their circumstances. Is there a reason for them not performing? Because maybe there's things going on at home that you're not aware of. So unless you're speaking to your people regularly, you might not necessarily be aware of that. So don't be afraid to ask people what they want outside of what they're doing outside of the business. One thing that a lot of understanding people's personal circumstances is always a tricky one. We often don't know why or what's going on behind the scenes unless we've made that effort. So it's often a good idea to be asking people what problems they have, sharing your own issues at home, regularly asking how are the kids, how's the wife, sharing details of your own family as well. One example of what Russ has done for me recently, my visa needed to be extended, which was it was coming up to the last couple of months. I obviously mentioned this to him. He was aware of it before, but originally it was going to be down to my wife to get us permanent residency. That hasn't materialized as it should have. So Russ was aware of this because he's continually asked me kind of how things were going, and as soon as that changed. And I needed to be sponsored. He just actioned everything very, very quickly. But in doing so, it actually created a secondary issue for me in that I actually couldn't get a loan for my car to pay off the balloon payment. So What Russ did was actually help me out with that. Now, I'm not saying everyone's going to be able to do that for their staff, but in terms of kind of contemporary leadership, he's made it extremely easy for me to want to be with this business long term. Very bought in, and you kind of get that feeling, why would you want to go and work anywhere else when someone's able to and willing to help me so easily. So thinking of how you can help your people both in work and outside of work, very important. Often, within a business, you might start to have bottlenecks. So this is now thinking more about what you have in terms of progression lined up for people. If you have senior members of staff who are managing other very experienced people, and those experienced people are potentially looking to make that move, that step up, it might not necessarily be that they can do that. So what you need to be doing is speaking to them about what their goals are over the next few years. And talking openly about, if you see yourself outside this business, that's absolutely fine. That in fact, let's work towards getting you to that end destination that you want to go to. Thinking of training that can be provided and ways you can do that, because it might be that the person that person reports into, there's nowhere for them to promote, and they're not going to be going anywhere. So by being aware of what someone's long-term goals and aspirations are, you can be aware of where they're wanting to get to. And if it's just simply not a possibility within your business, that's okay. But it's better to know about that than not. And I think when that happens, staff appreciate that. They feel a lot more open about coming to you with problems, or when they might be thinking of moving. But often it also works in kind of in reverse. People will often just be even more bought into a business, especially if it's such an open environment where they can speak to their to their boss like that. And you might find out that you actually end up getting them bought in, for a lot longer than was initially anticipated. Because after all, people's circumstances do change. So what someone tells you they want to do a year ago might change, 6 months, a year later. Maybe they've had children, maybe they've moved location. It's various different reasons. But by being aware of that, you can stay ahead of the curve, essentially. Now, with management, this is probably another talk for another time, but you also need to remember of the different personality types within a business. A lot of people love recognition and praise. Some people just want to be left to get on with the job. Some don't respond well to feedback, etc. So there's a whole different heap of different personalities that you will have within a business. And one thing that we did in my previous organization is we did the Myers-Briggs personality test. And it actually brought out some really interesting information, some of which you actually didn't know yourself, let alone your manager. And it does break down and give you a better understanding of how your mind works and how it's probably best to manage you long term. So it's worth looking into. I can send. It's called the Myers-Briggs personality test. Again, just in case you're interested in looking at that. People want to feel like they're developing and that they have some control over it. Often when you have people within the business, it's a really good idea to have tailored programs, training programs, focusing on what they want long term. and basically letting them have a feeling of control, and that you're going to be able to help them achieve this, and their long-term goals. External courses as well. Can the employee have some say in the external courses that might benefit them and you as a business? And maybe they can put forward a business use case for them to do that. And generally speaking, training should be structured, not ad hoc. It shouldn't be just off the cuff, unless it's part of a broader program. Try and keep it, as part of the program, and structured so that people are aware of what's coming next, and what they're going to need to do to achieve that next piece. Salaries and benefits. Okay, so do you know what's attractive to people? Are you keeping an eye on what other companies are paying? Are you aware of your competition and what salary and benefits they're offering people? Maybe you look at some of the businesses that are doing really well. Can you speak to any of their people to understand what benefits and perks they get? Can you give, look, so one thing that we find really annoys people is that they feel like they get left behind. Let's say they've been a very loyal member of staff, they've been with you for 5-6 years, but they haven't received many pay reviews or even pay increases in general, and they start to feel aware that they're being left behind. It's one thing to give someone a pay review, but to actually give them that pay rise that they deserve. Or, well, maybe they don't, but it's a real bugbear, and something that if left not dealt with correctly, and I've got a couple of examples later on, does really start to turn someone's head. Surveyors, we often, when we speak to them, they love the businesses that do the paid overtime. There's still quite a few businesses that we work with and don't work with that don't pay overtime. A lot of guys, when they call us, it's one of the questions they ask. Do they pay overtime? So it's something definitely to bear in mind. And do you offer other benefits such as health insurance, portable leave, things like that? If there are bonuses that you guys pay, be very clear on the objectives and KPIs around those and how it's achieved. Many people that we speak to don't actually understand how bonuses work at times and what they need to do, especially if it's part of a wider company program. So yeah, do your best to make them aware of that. I think it's good to do 6 monthly reviews to basically make sure that you're talking to your staff regularly, and that they get the feeling that you've not forgot about them. Make sure everything's documented as well. So when you go through these things, have the conversation with them, but then document it and send them an email with what you've spoken about. And if you've put targets in place, make sure that's documented so they have that in black and white. It's a much easier conversation than 6 months later at the annual review to discuss, what targets have been met, what hasn't, and what they can expect if they have achieved those. And there's no back and forth. There's no not arguments, but there's no disagreements on if they've missed something, if that makes sense. With some we're probably I'm talking about the more higher level people now, the people that have been with the business for a long time. If you get an idea that they might be starting to look to leave, can you incentivize them with some form of like a golden handcuffs, let's call it, whereby Maybe you can offer them some form of financial incentive bonus if they can, stay with you. Or, is it time to look at, making an equity partner from them? Really trying to entice them. Maybe there's a, really big project coming up that they're absolutely imperative to be on. It's possible to incentivize, most people, given the right circumstances. And we do hear of it quite a lot. More senior people being asked to stay on for an extra couple of years, but by doing so, quite a lot. Well, a bonus will be paid to them for doing so. I feel like money is the biggest risk when it comes to retention, especially at the moment. Cost of living crisis, everything's going up in costs. We need more and more money to live, it seems. So it's just something that you really need to, and I understand as well, not every business can just keep handing more and more money out, but if you can't at least make sure that you're having regular conversations with your people, explaining where the business is, what you're wanting to achieve, and making them aware that, that there is, better times coming, and that you can help them, long term with their career. It's proven that staying in the same, and this isn't what we want to hear, but it's proven that staying in the same role, or staying with the same business, and trying to reach those promotions organically actually doesn't benefit you long term. People that move every 4-5 years to attain that next level of position and higher package, actually at the end of their career, tend to have ultimately done more in terms of their earnings. So again, something we need to be aware of. One thing that Hays does, so that, Hays, you've probably heard of them, you may work with them. They basically retain their staff very, very well. They don't necessarily overpay. In fact, they might even underpay slightly. But they're able to keep their people really engaged. They've got about 16 levels of promotion. But what they're able to do is, you're able to promote people every 6 months, a year, and it's that feeling of achievement, and that you're going somewhere within a business. And these pay increases might only be $1,000 a year. But it's continuous, and it does make people feel very bought in, and they're achieving and doing good things within the business. So yeah, that kind of brings us on to keep or lose. When we're talking about pay, perhaps someone's starting to think, well, I could get something better somewhere else. You really need to be confident and sure that if the person that has decided that they're going to leave, you need to be sure whether you want to counter offer them, essentially. It can often, I've put some statistics there for you guys to read through. It does cause at times disharmony in a business. So maybe it's just that you want to keep someone on for, you need them to stay for another 6 months, a year, might be worth it. But if there are concerns or question marks, you really do need to think carefully about what you want to do with them. Because after someone has taken a counter offer, you need to be, as their employer, you still need to be able to approach them in the same manner as you did before, offer them the same opportunities, although often that just doesn't happen after. So yeah, you need to be very confident that if you do offer them more money to stay, you're going to be able to treat them as you did before, fairly, along the lines with everyone else in the business. One person I spoke to, I think it was last week, a surveyor. He'd spent the last 5 years, 6 years with the business, worked his way, through the ranks essentially, and was promised a pay rise once he'd completed all of his training. This was spoken about a couple of times that he'd received this pay rise, but then ultimately when he got to that point of being promoted, kind of all communications stopped around this pay rise that had been promised to him. That went on for about 6 or 7 months, and eventually he got a bit frustrated. He actually went to his boss and spoke to them about it, at which point he was then told that, well, look, things aren't great at the moment, so we're probably not going to be able to give you that pay increase that he was promised. At which point he was on the phone to me probably a few hours later, to discuss what options he had outside of that business. Now, the business, I understand that a lot of businesses aren't doing well, so I actually understand why they weren't able to give him a pay rise. In my view, though, I just felt like the business could have handled it a lot differently, not going silent on him and almost just hiding from the problem, the issue that they'd promised someone more money, and knowing that he was waiting to have that conversation. They'd let his mind wander too much. And I think if they'd have just been very open and honest and explained to him, as soon as he was promoted, or even before that, having that conversation before, probably could have been dealt with differently. Because ultimately, what's happened is he's now decided to leave. Upon deciding to leave, the business has now decided they want to offer him more money. He just thinks like it's he's not interested. He's not interested now. He's potentially found some what he feels are better options. So yeah, and that whole thing didn't take more than a couple of weeks. So really is very important to know if you are going to keep someone. But if you are going to keep someone, make sure you get it done early. Don't wait too long, because you probably will miss that opportunity. Okay, so in conclusion, so what I would say is if you're going to take anything away from this, offering competitive salaries and benefits or as best as you can, is obviously crucial. Provide opportunities for professional development and career advancement. Foster a positive and inclusive work environment. Recognise and reward employee contributions, and try as best as you can to ensure a good work-life balance. I know that is difficult sometimes, especially in surveying, but as mentioned before, if someone's been on a very long project or job for months, and they're starting to burn out, and you can feel that you've spoken to them, maybe there's something you can do to balance that out a little bit. Half a day off somewhere, or just recognition and thanking them for the work they've been doing. It's not gone unnoticed. And that pretty much concludes the presentation. Do we have any questions on this?
Garry, thank you so much for that. That was a fascinating presentation, and yeah, I encourage all participants to start putting in some questions for Garry while we've got a bit of time. I've got a couple for you. So my takeaway is that probably the ultimate thing in retaining staff is good communication.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so from that, I would question, when you place someone in a business, do you follow up with them, say 3 months later, to see how things are going? And does anything ever come out of that needs to go back to the business to encourage that communication to maybe improve?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we do that. So I personally give someone a call after the first week to see how they've done, and then after that it goes to monthly. And I do that for the first few months. I still stay in contact with people even after, let's say, probationary periods, etc. But what often comes out of that, so I had it with a chap who joined a business out in regional South Australia a couple of weeks ago, whereby he'd started with them. Lovely guy, but someone that he doesn't want to feel like he is causing a problem. Not that it. So the problem that he had was he was unsure. So he's moved out there. There's a small relocation package been put in place with but he's basically got housing for a month. But it's an area where it's hard to get digs. Essentially, there's not much on the market. He was worried about going to his boss and having that conversation. So I basically had that conversation, not for him, but I spoke to the owner and just said, look, this is what's going on. He's concerned that, at the end of this, he might not have anywhere to live. He didn't want to bring it to you. Just so you're aware, this is his personality type. He'll do exactly what you want him to do without any question. But if he has worries or any concerns, he's probably not going to voice them. So it's important that you, moving forward, sit down with him regularly and just ask him, is there anything, that you have any concerns over? It's okay if you do. It's not this isn't an argument. I just need to know. I want to help you, the best I can. And look, it was really well received. But yeah, that's something we do.
That's fantastic, actually, really interesting. My other question was, I found it fascinating that you see burnout as the number one kind of thing that occurs in surveying. Have you got any tips for businesses to counteract that?
So again, I think it largely comes down to communication. Look, it's easy for me to come on here and say, oh, don't let your people burn out. Don't put them on, challenging projects. Of course, I know you have to do that. The people have to obviously, pay for themselves and do the work. But yes, we hear about it often, long hours, really hefty commutes, especially if someone's coming from the metro area. Maybe they're out doing jobs regionally, long commutes. I personally just think, again, it comes down to communication. Again, speaking to your people, letting them know that, look, you understand this is it's a job that, you're not going to want to be on long term. We understand that, how you're probably going to be feeling. You're not going to be getting much time at home, in the evenings with family. But there are XYZ projects coming up. 2 of those are closer to home. I'm going to make sure that you're on one of those. And, rest assured, this isn't going to, last forever. If you can suck it up, we'll get you on something, closer to home, where it's going to be a bit easier for you moving down the line. Ultimately, if you're unable to schedule your jobs and plan for your people like that, I think ultimately you probably will have a problem. Especially when I talk about long commutes, I'm talking about people that are probably having to drive 2+ hours, either way, each day, on projects that are riddled with issues. There's a lot of concerns on them. Yeah, that is something we hear a lot, and people start to, they can't see an end in sight. So, but I think you've just got to speak to them regularly.
I think, just to add to that, when we see burnout, the first thing we see when a candidate approaches us that's close to burnout, they always want to do something different. It's not necessarily they want to leave their employer. It's very often, I don't want to do surveying anymore. I want to change my career to X, Y, Z. How are my skills transferable? So the employer actually has quite a bit of lead time in that you're not going to be able to jump out and just do a non-surveying job unless you take a massive pay cut, do something, go to the bottom of your run again or whatever. So the employer has a bit of time in how they do it. So if they've got that, again, as Garry says, that communication, that contemporary leadership style, so if someone can come to them saying, I'm thinking about moving out of surveying, it gives you that chance to work with them, and you're not going to lose them. You might lose them to something completely random in 2-3 years' time, but it gives you that buy-in with them initially. And if you've got that buy-in with them initially, you tend to keep them. It's if they're forgotten about, you lose them.
Yeah, that's great. Now, we've got a question from Tim. So the survey industry has an issue attracting young people into the profession. As a recruiter, do you have any ideas as to what surveyors can do to get young people into the industry?
I think you're not the only. We're dealing with a lot of associations. So the Planning Institute's got exactly the same issues. The building surveying industry's got the same issues. I think it's land surveying's quite a hidden industry at school. No one really sees it, or they sort of see tripods in the street. They don't really know what they do. I think you've really got to start engaging at that school level so that they know what an engineer does. And if you ask them what they want to do, they want to be an engineer or an architect, because that's where they think the money is, that's where they think the projects are, and surveying's sort of hidden a bit underneath it. I think raising that profile at school, whether the associations can do anything around projects at school or anything like that, just to raise that profile of the profession. If you can get it at that school age, you'll get them. But it really is engage. It's a fight for talent across every sector, and you've got to engage it at that school age these days.
Yeah.
I think as well, moving kind of just a little bit past that, when you actually do get a graduate surveyor into a business, I hear it a lot, whereby the graduate surveyor isn't given the correct or enough support and guidance, and ultimately decides 6 months, a year down the line to leave the profession and go and do something else. I hear that all the time with both clients and surveyors that have left. Both the clients recognizing that they've not done a good enough job, and then the people moving out of the industry for that reason.
Yeah, we're in quite a quandary at the moment. So yeah, as an industry, we have a lot of work to do to build our profile and encourage more people into the sector. And staff retention is a huge component of that. I've got a comment from Peter that the industry is slowing up. So I guess that then probably raises the question that while the industry is in slowdown, from your experience, what's the best way to keep your staff or to deal with staffing levels in this kind of climate?
What's the best way to keep your staff when it's slow? It is a difficult one. If you're lucky enough to be a business whereby you are perhaps better set up in terms of your systems, your processes, you've been trading for a lot longer. I think often those types of businesses, because they've been around longer, can have those bigger, more glitzy equipment, systems, offices, which will be an attraction to people. But in an industry where things are slowing down, you're probably going to find that a lot of people just won't have places to move to, because there's not many, especially in Victoria, there's not lots and lots of hiring going on. It's quite the reverse. So for that reason, the people that you're employing currently won't have as many options, and that's why I take it back to one of the first things I said, whereby we're kind of in that place whereby people might be in a business thinking about moving, but it's just not possible. So when things do start to pick up, whenever that might be, that's probably going to be the time when those people that are got itchy feet, maybe they're then going to they will then be looking, but to try and retain them, I think you've just got to, is there additional training, courses you can get them on, make them feel like they, although it's not as busy, they can still, progress and develop themselves as a surveyor, through other means, and just have regular conversations with them. Again, communication again. And I keep going on about communication, but that's because it's one of the things that we always hear from people. We often hear that, especially from some of the smaller businesses, where your owner might also act as HR, finance, they might be the technical expert. Those businesses sometimes, because that person's got so much to do, they just don't have time to do all aspects of the business really well. I think if you can, regular communications, and if you are a business like that, can you, rather than going out to a recruiter and hiring a middle manager, again in Victoria, potentially not looking to do that at the moment because we're not that busy, but can you promote people within to take on those additional responsibilities within a business, empowering them and making them feel valued again, could be a way to go.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, it's definitely food for thought. Do you think, and we do have another question, but I want to sneak one in while we're on this topic, that when the industry does pick up, does that mean that our wages that candidates will be looking for will be much higher because there'll be more demand? Is that something we should be thinking about at this stage in the lead up, or potentially if we're looking that we might need people, that it might be, as a business, better for us to do so now than when things pick up?
I think some people will be. It depends what the situation of that person is. Has the person been in the business for a few years without a pay rise, or have they just received one? Look, a lot of candidates will just try their luck to see, if they can get, a really big, salary increase. But, it's our job to, look, we need to make it work for them, but as well as the businesses we work for. So when we hear, if someone's looking for a pretty dramatic increase, the questions are, well, why are you worth that? What have you been doing that's obviously pretty exceptional then to deserve that? And if someone can quantify why that is, then perhaps they will be. But just because it gets busier, I don't necessarily think everyone's going to be looking for more money. I think it might just be that the culture, the workplace atmosphere isn't what they want, and maybe they're going to look to move for that reason. But yeah, you are right. Often it is down to money. So there probably will be.
I think as well, historically, if you look post-COVID, when we had that last boom, salaries went nuts because everyone's competing against it. So I think to answer your question, well, yes, salaries I think will increase. But going back to a point Gary said early on, your issue is not, once they get to that door and they're looking outside that door and going, well, what else is out there? Your employees are going to see 10 grand, 15 grand, 20 grand pay rises. So at that point, you've got a severe problem. But if you've been the sort of employer that's talking to them all the way through and potentially giving a minor incremental pay rise, because no one's going to be expecting a pay rise in this market, but a very minor one, that keeps them from looking outside that door and potentially stops you needing that 15 grand pay rise. Yes, you probably need to still increase, but you're actually probably going to save yourself in the long run 5-10 grand by giving someone a grand pay rise in a more difficult market.
Cool. All right, now we've got time for one more question. This is from Peter. What is a vehicle worth per annum in dollars when adding this to an employment contract?
I think we usually work it out to 10 grand, 10,000.
Okay, yeah.
Would you say different, Russ, or?
I'm not the expert on that, mate. That's right. You said 10 grand, to be honest, sounds low. I guess it depends how it's packaged in terms of salary sacrificing and trying to. I'd talk to a tax accountant on that, and they're probably in a better place to advise.
Yeah. So Pete has then gone and said that that's cheap. So yeah, it might be have a chat to a few other people about that one as well. Anyway, we have run out of time, and I'd just like to thank both Garry and Russell for their time this morning and for your presentation, and to all of the audience for their participation. So thank you again as sponsor to Plan Resources and also to the organising committee. So thanks everyone for coming. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we look forward to seeing you on Thursday at the last of our webinar series. Bye for now.
Thank you.